Jumpin In on Manx Radio.
With Howard and Chris Kane.
Hello.
Good evening.
And welcome. And hello again for the final time in this slot, it has to be said, more shortly. Stay tuned. It is, of course, Jumpin' In. It is Saturday night. It is Manx Radio. It is the best in modern and contemporary sounds of jazz from around the globe with myself, H.
And me, Chris. Yes, welcome along to this week's show and get ready for a change as Manx Radio's 60th birthday celebrations continue with new programming slots from next week. More on that later, as H said. But for now, can you believe it's almost Wimbledon? I think flambéed strawberries with Strager black pepper and vanilla ice cream might be the way to go. And as for Pimm's, maybe you should mix it at home, as a glass of Pimm's at the Championships costs about the same as a whole bottle if you consume it at home. So H, what cocktail of cool, hot, blue, bop and swinging has been quenching you this week, and what's promoted you to call new balls, please?
Well, you know, I'm sort of going back in time and coming forward in time. There is a new album out on ECM from the late, great Thomas Stanko. Of course, a concert which was never released before, called September Night, coming out shortly. I've had a listen to that. Sounds great stuff, as Thomas's stuff always was in many ways. Genuinely going back in time with an all-star lineup of Lookout Farm, the group with Dave Liebman and Richie Bearike, and also our friend Jeff Williams, the drummer on that one, and George Russell's Living Time Orchestra Volume 1. I thought we'd have a snippet of that.
And from me, well, we imbibe of the aqua vitae. We fail to solve a puzzle. We step out in a big way, and to start, well, we see it all passing before us with the Tobias Becker Big Band and Life Streams. fabulous Tobias Becker Big Band with Lifestream's Sweet First Movement, taken from the 2013 album of the same name. Well, Lifestream, with Tobias' slick compositions and tight arrangements putting the 17-piece band through their paces. And as I delve more into this young German composer's catalogue, I have yet to find anything I didn't find was exciting and with a great drive and a swinging sound. Lovely ensemble work and lovely solos throughout. A band I would definitely like to catch live.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind catching them live either. I wouldn't have minded seeing this band live as well, actually. Lookout Farm. It was an all-star lineup back in the day. Happily to say that quite a few of the people are still playing today. Dave Liebman leading the band on soprano, sax, flute and percussion. Richie Berak on piano. Frank Chusa bass. Jeff Williams, we last saw him at the London Jazz Festival leading a great group. Brought out some cracking albums the last 2 or 3 years on drums. And Bad Al Roy, who I don't think is around anymore. He used to be knocking around a lot in the 70s, doing percussion and tabla and various sounds like that. He was a sort of almost like a sort of another version of Nana Vasconcelos, albeit I think Bad Al was Indian American rather than Brazilian descent. Anyway, Lookout Farm, as I say, great lineup. It was a mixture of sort of quite rocky, very free at times, great wild blowing at other times as well. This one is at live at Onkel Pur's in Carnegie Hall, Hamburg, 1975. And there, it's a live thing, and it goes straight on to another one. So you can tell it's coming out of the Coltrane sheets of sound. It was 1975, this Dave Liebman, now an elder statesman, still going strong in his 70s, but then just in his early 20s. And as we say, very much a Coltrane acolyte with those great circular breathing and sheets of sound, sounds coming out, with waves of sound coming across, sort of quite angry, quite still free in many ways. And yeah, it was a sort of a new sound then, and it was coming out of the sort of free jazz movement of the 60s as well. Lookout Farm, of course, strangely, even that really fairly free sound there, their first album came out on ECM, of course, the very first one of ECM. I don't actually think I've got that from the... I'm trying to rack my brains, but I've seen the album. I know the one. I think it was just called Lookout Farm, but I'm not familiar with it. I'll have to dig that one out one way or another. And it got great acclaim on ECM. Dave Liebman and Richie Berak, known each other for years and go way back together, and then formed this band, as I say, with a great lineup, including Jeff Williams on drums, who is still going. Badal Roy, who I'm right, did leave us a couple of years ago in 2022. And Richie Berak, I'm happy to say, he's still playing as well. And Frank Chusa on the bass. And I'll listen to the rest of that at some stage. It's not maybe the sort of music that you'll put on at a quiet time, but if you're wanting to get yourself going, that's the one to go for. By the way, just looking at that as well, there's a couple of tracks by Dave Liebman, and then, would you believe, there's a track by Frank Sinatra.
Yes, not his usual canon, that track, certainly. Now, new releases from Positone are always a treat, and nearly always good car albums, as they tend to swing like crazy. And this latest from saxophonist and composer Willie Morris is no exception. Carrying on from where last year's Conversation Starter left off, alternative listening, attentive, listening, keeps fellow saxman Patrick Cornelius with him in the front line, giving Morris a fellow talented horn player to bounce off and trade licks with. Here's Water Fountain of Youth. Water Fountain of Youth from the Willie Davis Quintet. What a great solo there from Willie, and indeed from Patrick Cornelius, who we caught up with and had a chat at Southport Jazz Festival quite a few years ago now. And also pianist John Davis. Both pianist John Davis and Patrick Cornelius were carried across from the last album, but with a new and perhaps a harder driving rhythm section of Boris Kozlov on the bass, and some fantastic drumming there from Rudy Royston. Great to hear young players like these keeping bop alive, and many thanks as always to Positone for sending us a copy.
Absolutely, it is Jumping In, and you're on Manx Radio. And speaking of attentive listening, well, you need some attentive listening now, because changes are afoot, as we hinted at the beginning of the programme, and that this being Manx Radio's 60th year. Post-Timble this year, there is a schedule revamp going on, and celebrating the 60th year of Manx Radio, and also going forward into the brave new world, I suppose, into the next 60 years. Either way, from the point of view of Jumping In, it means there are going to be some changes, and that Jumping In is actually moving to join Sweet and Swing on a Friday night, and they henceforth going forward will be alternating. So if you want your fix of modern jazz, or if you want to try again its sister program Sweet and Swing, which is the earlier type, so it covers swing and Dixie and big band and nostalgia, that the old maestro used to do as well, then that is going to be at the same time slot at 9 o'clock on a Friday night, and the two programs will now be alternating with each other. So that will be starting, unless my knowledge is out of date, which I hope it isn't, on Timble Day, the 5th of July, of course, this year. We'll be starting with Sweet and Swing, 9 o'clock on Friday night on the 5th, and then we'll be following that the following week on the 12th, if my maths is correct, with, of course, Jumping In, and then on we'll go with their 19th, and so on and so forth. So we'll be alternating on Friday nights going forward in the Brave New World, with jazz, modern jazz on one week, and then the more nostalgia, swing and big band jazz on the second week in Sweet and Swing. So do be aware of that. You're listening forward and you think, my word, it's slightly older stuff than usual, albeit we'll now be on a Friday night. Okay, so hope to see you there. Drop us a line anytime you want, of course, with any thoughts. Howard Kane at manxradio.com, Chris Kane at manxradio.com, E on the Kane. A wonderful new thing which has just reached us in the last few days as we are talking to you now was a new release from Thomas Stanko. Now, of course, Thomas sadly no longer with us, passed away a few years ago, but ECM have unearthed a concert recorded in September of 2004, previously unreleased, with his trio, Marcin Wasilewski on piano, of course, Slavomir Kirkovits double bass, and Michel Miskiewicz on the drums, and great stuff it sounds too. Frankly, there's not much that Thomas Stanko recorded I haven't enjoyed over the years. Have a listen to the first track on the album, Hermento's Mood. Lovely stuff. As I say, very rare. I've heard a Stanko album I haven't actually enjoyed. This new one, as I said, recorded in 2004, and a fascinating document, as it's described, with capturing a developmental chapter in the group's music, which is probably about right, actually, between the song forms of Suspended Night and the improvised areas the Polish players would explore on the other album, Lontano, and this is firmly in between the two. A highlight in a year in which Stanko played a number of gigs around the world with extensive tours of the United States and of Europe, and it captures him pretty much at his best, I would say, playing really, really well. Great support again from his Polish trio, all young now, put several albums out, of course, just as the trio under their own name, led by Marcin Wasilewski at the piano. And this quartet really brought Thomas a new level of recognition in the wake of The Soul of Things, which was the first of his ECM discs with this trio, and the trumpeter won the European Jazz Prize that year. It's called September Night. I'm expecting great things from the rest of the album when I've heard it, but it's not due out. In fact, no, it is due out on the 21st, so you should be able to get your hands on it already, I think. Thomas Stanko, September Night. You can get the CD if you like, probably available on vinyl, or of course it'll be there as download.
And we caught him a number of times round about that period. Fantastic period of music, and a lovely guy, sadly missed. Next up from me, a thrilling new release from pianist and composer Sebastian Amann, who has been a regular on the New York scene since 2008. He has 3 or 4 different groups. I must admit, I didn't have any of his catalogue in my collection. I've amended that now. Amann is passionate about our future, and he says that the work and writings of many native and indigenous wisdoms have heightened his awareness of the urgent polycrisis of pollution, climate change, biodiversity loss, social inequity, and public health. And through his record, he says, I aim to empower my fellow humans to drive systemic changes towards a regenerative future for all living beings. Lofty ambitions for a CD, perhaps, but the music speaks for itself. Here's Jevon's Paradox. Jevons's Paradox from Sebastian Amann's recently released album Change of Course from his Gaia quartet. Gaia, of course, being Mother Earth, the ancestral mother of all life, and many of you will have been lucky enough to see the fantastic floating 6-metre illuminated globe recently displayed at St Thomas's Church as part of an installation from Net Zero Isle of Man. And they had a series of concerts, and you may even have caught Howard and I singing in the with our shanty group, Minds a Shanty.
Great stuff.
Arman says that the track at Jevons Paradox, the economist William Stanley Jevons described this effect in 1865. Jevons's Paradox states that the increase in efficiency of resource use will generally increase in resource consumption rather than a decrease. The Gaia Quartet is one of several groups Arman fronts, a great group containing trumpeter Ralph Alessi, bassist John Herbert and drummer Eric McPherson. Plus on that track, saxophonist Caroline Davis, who's on a couple of tracks.
Very good too. I'm taking you back to 1989 now with the late great George Russell, who had his Living Time Orchestra performing in London live at Ronnie Scott's for a 2-volume album that came out later on Stash Records. And we're going to hear the first track on volume 1, in fact, La Folia, the Rossella Variations. And there it fades into the next track, was recorded live over 2 volumes. In fact, it was recorded or released live at Ronnie Scott's Club in London the 28th to the 31st of August 1989. And George Russell described as the Duke Ellington of our generation. I'd probably agree there. And as Gilles Anquetil says in the liner notes, since the death of Gil Evans, the only musician really capable of magically firing up a big band, famously always tweaking with his Lydian chromatic concept of tonal organisation. And if you can understand that, you're a better man than I. But there's yards you can read about that online and elsewhere. And of course, Jan Garbarek and Esoteric Circle and such like, going right the way back to the 70s, a theory which revolutionised scoring for jazz bands. He was something of an academic and chess player and such like as well. Sadly no longer with us, but again, you'd never go wrong with the George Russell album. Really good stuff.
Well, that's about it for this week's show, and indeed for our current slot on Saturday nights. Starting from next Friday, the 5th of July, Timble Day, of course, we'll be sharing the slot with Sweet and Swing. As H said, he'll be taking the first one, and then we'll alternate going forward, but you can still catch up on the podcast whenever it takes your fancy. So for now, we'll leave you with a track from the never less than exciting and challenging trio HLK and their latest release, Anthropometrics, which, as I'm sure you all know, is the science of measuring the size and proportions of the human body. On this second release of the trio of Richard Harold on piano, Ant Law on guitar, and drummer Richard Cass are again deconstructing standards in their own unique way. On Flanagan's Lament, they may be expressing their sorrow for Tommy Flanagan having to chase train through the tricky changes of Giant Steps, none other, once described as the most feared song in jazz, as it was one of the most challenging chord progressions to improvise over. See you soon. Bye for now.
See you on that Friday. You take care now.